Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Catherine Spencer-Ross, Chair of Heritage Ottawa's Lecture Series Committee. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's lecture, Cundell Stables, the last stable in Lowertown, presented by Karen Bailey. Each year in December, we like to present something a little different and cheerful, and we hope you'll find this lecture makes the mark. Under normal circumstances, we would meet in person and celebrate with a seasonal reception following the lecture. Alas, once again, the pandemic has made this impossible. However, on a positive note, we can see we have a large crowd online and no one has had to brave the weather to join us. In advance of introducing Karen, I have a few housekeeping items. If you have technical problems at any time during the event, please use the Q&A tool. If you're unable to do so for some reason, please email info@heritageottawa.org. For the optimum way to view tonight's presentation, we recommend you use the side-by-side speaker function in Zoom, which you may find by selecting the view option in the top right corner of your screen. At the end of tonight's lecture, you will have an opportunity to ask questions once the speaker has completed her presentation. Please submit your question via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen in the black band. Feel free to ask your questions in the official language of your choice. Anne Mayhew, an art conservator, member of our lecture series committee, and a former Heritage Ottawa board member, will come on after the presentation and will moderate the questions and then close our event. Before we start the presentation, I take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Andrix Holdings, Inc. and Sandy Smallwood. Andrix has been a faithful sponsor of these lectures, as well as of our walks and some publications. We also recognize and thank the City of Ottawa for its Operation Grant and the Province of Ontario for its Heritage Grant. In welcoming you to this free lecture, thank those of you who have made donations and encourage this very concrete form of support. For those of you who are not yet members, I encourage you to join us. Please connect with our website for information. Finally, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season and prosperous 2022. We look forward to seeing you at our lecture series as our lecture series continues in January. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. From heraldic painter to war artist, Karen Bailey's diverse artistic career spans 4 decades. Karen studied heraldry, calligraphy, and illumination at the Reigate School of Art and Design in England, and first exhibited her heraldic art at the Victoria and Albert Museum, London, in 1981. Past work has included book illustration for Apple Tree Press in the UK and courtroom drawing for Global Television. Twice she has received the prestigious Elizabeth Greenshields Grant for Drawing and Painting. Karen is also the recipient of a Heritage Ottawa Cullingham Grant for the project she will speak about this evening. Many of Karen's paintings feature behind-the-scenes workers and under-recognized people. Past series have highlighted the working life of servers, and in her Blanche Dot Doris show in 2008, she focused on older women preparing food for church functions. In 2007, she traveled to Afghanistan as an appointed war artist to document Canadian military medical personnel at the Role 3 Multinational Medical Unit Trauma Hospital in Kandahar. Her official portrait of the Right Honourable Michaëlle Jean, 27th Governor General of Canada, was unveiled in 2012. In Raising Stanley, Life with Tulia in 2018, a collaborative exhibition and theatrical performance, she documented the journey from puppy to working guide dog for the blind. More recently, inspired by 2 sojourns to Fogo Island, Newfoundland, Karen painted the people and landscape of this remote island. In the Cundell Stables project, she continues her themes of service and community. Karen, we're delighted you have joined us this evening. And with that, I'm very pleased now to turn the reins over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. It's lovely to be here with all of you. And I want to especially to thank Heritage Ottawa for inviting me to speak at this event. And even more important is the funding I received from Heritage Ottawa through the Gordon Cullingham Award for Research and Publication, because that's what's made this, this Cundell Stables project a reality. I have a huge thank you to the Cundell family, especially to Johnny Cundell, partner Patti Newton, daughter Taylor, and stable hand Big John O'Hara, who've tolerated my continued presence over the last 2 years. And I mean continued presence. I live, as you know, just right almost next door to Cundell Stables. I have an enormous thank you to say to Marc Aubin, who's my collaborator. He's a writer. He's a 5th generation French Canadian Lowertown resident, and he specializes in Lowertown history. Marc researched and wrote the comprehensive text on the Cundell family, and he sourced the historic photos. And I think it was a bigger project than he originally anticipated, but I'm hoping he's going to be pleased when he has the book in his hand with his name on the cover. And of course, my sister, I must thank, because she did a fabulous job on the book design. She's a book designer based in Toronto, and I'm just so fortunate to have her working on this for me. She's done just a remarkable job. Rachel Oogster was the editor, and I'm so thankful that I found Rachel for this job. She's been perfect. And Francois Girard is the French translator, which again was just, he did a remarkable job. And I'm so glad. I had no idea how to find a French translator, but one of our funders, Ottawa Bilang, I asked for a recommendation, and he was the first recommendation. And I just want to say one thing about Francois now. I was absolutely delighted when he let me know. I described the project, and he let me know that his father had worked in the bush as a logger, and had worked with big horses all his life. So his father was a lumberjack and knew all about Belgians and Percherons and all of those horses that, of course, John Cundell knows about. So it was a familiar topic. I'd like to thank the other funders for this project. The City of Ottawa awarded us a grant for, it was the Heritage Project funding. And of course, Ottawa Bilang, Bilingual Ottawa, was responsible for giving us a grant to make sure that we were able to translate the book into French, which was so important because Lowertown was, in a sense, founded by the French and English, or French and Irish, I should say. And it's really important to me that the book, that Ottawa is a bilingual city, and that this book reflect that. And just as a point of interest is that John Cundell's father, of course, was a Cundell born of Irish stock, but his mother was a Francophone. So it makes sense that the book be both French and English. And the Government of Canada helped to support this, as did l'Association de Communautés Francophones d'Ottawa. So thank you for all of those funders. And now I'm going to set up my images. So you can just wait. I'm sharing the screen now, and you should see the cover of the book appear on your screen. And this will be the cover, and that's the title, The Last Stable in Lowertown, La Dernière Écurie de la Baville, Cundell Stables, Ottawa, Karen Bailey and Marc Aubin. And that's a portrait that I did, a tribute to Chip, who is one of the Belgian draft horses belonging to John Cundell. And that's John Cundell holding one of the reins for Chip in the front. And Chip is in harness in this painting, which was really important that I show, because it's like, in a sense, it's the way a soldier is presented in his uniform, and that's how Chip is presented. I wanted to explain that this talk is really from the perspective of an artist and a neighbor. I'm not a heritage expert in Lowertown history and Lowertown architecture. My focus here is on the lived experience of the Cundell family and life at the stables, and the life at the stables as I have seen it and continue to see it. And this evening, I'm going to speak to you about how I began this project. I'm going to be describing the stables. I'm going to give you just a potted Cundell family history, because that's not my area of expertise. But the other thing I'm going to go on to, of course, is my artistic process, and you'll be seeing images of my paintings. At the end, I'm going to show you page spreads from the book. If this had been, I suppose, if this had been a live performance, so to speak, a live lecture at the Christmas event for Heritage Ottawa, I might have had books here available for people to see in real life, but you can look at some of them on the screen. I'm going to start with an image of York Street. And this is 115 York Street, which is the home of John Cundell and Patti Newton. And along this strip, of course, you can see they're all heritage houses. And it's right next to the Tea Party, which some of you may know in Lowertown was a wonderful little cafe, which is no longer in business, but right next door to John Cundell's is a Tea Party. And it's a snowy picture on this day that I took the picture, but it's very clear sky. And of course, because it's a winter, the trees are bare, which is good because you can see the architecture of the houses along the varied architecture all along the way. Behind the Cundell's house and behind the Tea Party is an 8-story condominium building. And the address there is 144 Clarence Street. And this is where in 2018, my husband and I moved into to the 5th floor. And I remember when we first moved in, of course, you're excited about living in a new place, but I remember hearing the clip-clop sound, which sounded like horses. And I thought that's strange. I went out onto the balcony and I could smell horse manure out on the balcony. And I looked down and I saw 2 enormous horses pulling a coal black carriage out of the laneway below. And to me at that moment, the dichotomy of living in a modern building and looking down upon an old world activity, this just astonished me. I'd known about the Cundell Stables, but I think I hadn't realized just how exceptional it was until that time. And the perspective from 5 floors above was, to me, it was like watching a family saga unfold before my eyes, because I was able to watch the daily activity of maintaining a stable. And I found it absolutely mesmerizing. I'm a visual storyteller, and my focus is on behind the scenes workers and under-recognized people. So, of course, I thought all my birthdays had come at once when I was presented with the Cundell Stables literally at the doorstep. And in this image, you can see this is just looking into the laneway of Cundell Stables. So this gives you an idea of just how close our apartment is to the Cundell Stables and where we are in relation to them. So this is looking through into the night. You can see the shingle of the Cundell Stable shingle. And then there are the 8 stories. You can just see the balconies of 144 Clarence Street. And here's the red door of the barn. And again, in the distance, well, the distance is just about 10 feet away. You can see our apartment building. And you can see on the red door is hanging down is all of the horse paraphernalia, halters and martingales and parts of the harness. And that's the famous red and white barn. And that's where the horses live. this was what we looked down upon. This is a view where we can see the barn on the right-hand side. That's the gray building with the white snowy roof on the right. And there are the horses pulling the wagon below, and John Cundell's snow removal equipment and vehicles parked in what's the shared yard directly behind the tea party. So I think when you see this and see these images, I guess I'm showing the next image is of Taylor Cundell exercising little Janelle, but she's just small, I guess, in the foreground. And then you can see the back of the tea party, the back of the Cundell house. And of course, in the distance is the towers of Ottawa. So again, it's quite to me, it's always such a strange, once again, that dichotomy. There's a woman exercising a horse on a little black horse on a lunge line. And there the city towers behind. But you can see why, to me, this appeared so romantic. When I saw this extended family just going about their daily business, but it was so from another age, from another time. And I just found this was just a romantic setting. There's the loyal stable hand I'd see. There are all the racks of harnesses because they'd always be taking, Patti would be taking them out to clean them, all the horse leathers and equipment. I'd see the hay coming in, so there was hay piled high. You could, not always, but if the wind was in the right direction, the scent of manure out on our balcony, I could smell that. And of course, that familiar clattering of hooves when the horse is coming in and going out. We would always see excited passengers at the gateway, children especially, but everyone really so absolutely delighted at the sight of a horse and wagon, a horse and carriage. People just loved it. So you can see, and there was a carriage. This is the next image with a carriage in the foreground. You can see the lovely red velvet interior. And of course, it's not with the horse there. It's just sitting there in what was the shared yard with the tea party. And you can see John Cundell sitting there relaxing, and little Colson Cundell is playing in the laneway. But that is not the reality of life there today. The next image I'm showing you is, well, it was when the tear down of the back of the tea party. The building next door, the tea party, was put up for sale, and it was purchased by Patgonia, the outdoor clothing manufacturers. And they decided that they wanted to tear down part of the, well, I guess it's almost half of the older part of the building in the back, and construct a new 3-story addition. And they decided they wanted to have it built right to the very edge of the property line. So just to give you this idea of what this is like, as I say, you can see complete destruction because there's the machine that's taking everything apart. There are piles of lumber and bricks and skips and machines and things to take things away. And in the next image I'm showing you, it's just exactly, I suppose, how invasive this structure is, because it has completely filled what was once a shared yard. I'll just explain, and it's not that I'm against development or against any of those things, but I did go to City Hall in support of John and Patti. There was a hearing regarding this development. And even though they had shared this yard with the owners of 119 York Street since certainly since before 1948, which is a long time, they didn't win this case, and that Patgonia was able to build right to the property line in this case. So once again, I'm bringing up the reality, because the reality, I think, for the Cundells is living next door to a construction site, but also losing what had once been this shared yard. and learning to live and work in a very different kind of a way. So I think as well as this, of course, everybody knows there's construction and development all around everyone in the Byward Market and in Lowertown. And of course, that's what's happened, especially because John and Patti live so close to the center, really, of it, being on York Street. I think you can see, I just wanted to show you this one. This is the most recent picture. You can see they're almost finished that third floor of the back of the tea party. And so you could, just gives you an idea of how I won't be able to see quite as much of the activity that's going down with the Cundells, which they may prefer after the invasion of their privacy by this artist next door. They may want that, but really has been quite invasive with this new construction. I think this is probably a good time to move on from that to something a bit more positive, and that is just to explain a little bit about Johnny Cundell and Patti Newton. And I wanted to explain how when I first visited them and proposed the series of paintings to document the working life of the stables, and the idea was to have an exhibition and a book with family history. I think they were excited, certainly, about having their family history told, but I don't think they realized quite what they were getting themselves in for. I was like the paparazzi and a constant visitor. As the family history and the book were being put together, it became even more demanding for them. At the time that I started this project, their daughter Taylor and her partner Chris Toombs, their 6-year-old son Colson, and their baby Cashton, a newborn baby, were living with Johnny and Patti. So it's 3 generations living in the household. I'm going to read a little bit about what, give you this first, just a general pottered history, and then I'm going to read 2 quotes from the book, because I think that'll give you some idea of some of the things that are going on in the book. As I say, Marc isn't here to talk about that, and it would be a much longer talk because there's so much of great interest in the Cundell family history. William Cundell came from Dublin, Ireland in the early 1860s. He came with his wife, Mary, and their 3 young children, George, Elizabeth, and Thomas. And the present day Cundell descendants are from the oldest son, George, and George was born in 1847. They probably came as a result of the Great Irish Famine. And one thing for sure certain is that they brought with them the Irish affinity for horses. It's no doubt that the construction of the Parliament buildings really enticed William to Ottawa, because William was listed as a laborer in 1864. So we know that much. And the family were living at 185 York Street, which is just a few blocks over from 113. They were living there in the 1870s. George went on the next, I'm not going to give the whole history, but William's son George had a son, William, and William, the junior, he was already selling horses by the age of 12. And later he became one of the best known horse dealers in Eastern Ontario. And that William was John Cundell's grandfather. I'm going to take a quote now here. It's taken from the book, and this is about William, who was Johnny Cundell's grandfather. William was a man of great energy and resourcefulness. It takes a certain level of fearlessness and risk-taking to build a business, and this showed up in his early horse trading. One account of May 1909 tells the story of a horse deal gone bad, in which William sold a team of horses for $400 to the Independent Coal Company and received a horse and $200 in exchange. Cundell indicated he was guaranteed the horse was fine, but it turned out it was, in quotes, broken-winded. Soon after, the Ottawa Journal reported that he found himself in trouble, and the quote is, "As an easy method of settling the difficulty, Mr. Cundell put back the horse he'd been given with $200 and took his own team out of the coal company's stables. Cundell is charged with a theft and charges Brooks with criminal misrepresentation." In June, a jury found that because there was no bill of sale, the deal to sell horses above had never technically happened. William was therefore not required to stand trial. And in another quote from the book, I'm going to be referring to Fred, and that's Fred Cundell was Johnny's father, who followed in his father's footsteps in the horse business. And I quote, "In the fall, Fred sold horses to the bush," and that means the logging people. "In the spring, he bought them back from these same customers who didn't want to pay for feeding them during the summer. Fred didn't want to incur any extra feeding costs either, so he delivered the horses to the farms where they spent the summer working on the land and bringing in the crops. The only cost to the farmers was the price of feed and caring for the horses. Coming full circle, most of these horses were sold back to the bush in the autumn." So this book, as I say, it's bilingual and it contains Marc's complete history, which I highly recommend. Now there's an image. We are inside the barn. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my paintings and process. I spent 2 years on this project. Of course, it was during the pandemic. And I'd often say that my only friends are the Cundells, because really they were the only people, because that was my work, really they were the only people I saw during the pandemic. There are 31 paintings and a book. I painted some things from life. As you can see in this image, my easel is in the foreground and a little footstool that I'd sit on. And there's Big John in the background with a shovel with some manure and things on it. And behind him is, you can just see the backside of Chip in his stall. I painted from life using acrylic paint. That's how I paint. And I have a studio as well at the rectory on Murray Street. But due to the pandemic, I chose to work from our apartment. I kept on my studio, but I'm still working in an apartment just right now. I photographed everything that was going on there. And when I photograph, it's not that my photographs are brilliant photographs, but when I do photograph things, it's for reference. That's my main objective. So as well as photographing everything, I shadowed the Cundells. My husband and I went out when they were going to be at the cart fair, because they were in a cart class with the miniature horses. So we went to watch that. We went and watched them at Winterlude at the Governor General's when they had their wagon and the horses, and they were doing rides in the forest behind the Governor General's residence. All through of course, in the Byward Market, I'd see them all the time. We once arranged to go down to Elgin Street to watch them. There was a carriage ride, and we wanted to be there just to witness that. The one thing I will say that I've witnessed through this time is that the Cundells work tirelessly. And here, the next image you can see is in the foreground, my portrait of Big John, just in progress on the easel. And there in the middle ground is Big John sitting for his portrait with his cowboy hat on. And next to him in the stall, you can see a little Rosebud is poking her head out. And in the background, there's a myriad of, again, harnesses and, well, horse equipment and leathers and everything that you would find in a barn. And here's my portrait of Big John. And I just wanted to explain a little bit about him, because Big John O'Hara, he was born in Carleton Place, and he trained at the Pinto Valley Ranch. And the one thing about Big John is he absolutely loves stable life. He has volunteered to help out for 16 years at Cundell Stables. It's a 24/7 operation. And when you're working with animals, it's never boring. And I can completely understand the love of being in the stables, because I think in lots of ways I share that with Big John. The stables are kept spotless and the horses are groomed and exercised regularly. In the next image, you can see this is again one I did from life that was in looking into Jake's stall. And you'll often see this in the picture because there are those little horses. That's what I love, is that difference between the little tiny horses that are no taller than 36 inches, but then you'll also find these enormous Belgian draft horses, which weigh over a ton. So it's this wonderful contrast, and they all get along really well. And so that's little Dixie sticking her head out and looking curious to see what's going on, with Jake in his stall having a feed. You can just see him poking his head into his feed box. And this painting is called A Stable Friendship. You know, the horses and certainly all of the harnesses, everything is always cleaned all the time. In this image, Big John is grooming Chip, because this is a portrait again of Chip, who is standing in the not in his stall, but just in the hallway area of the stable, and all the little horses are sticking there. Well, it would be Jill, Janelle, and Rosebud are sticking their noses out of their stalls to witness what's going on. And because they always are, they're so curious. And you can imagine there's so much horse equipment in this, but I know Patti polishes all of the decorative harnesses and the bells and halters and all of the horse equipment. And I said it's a 24/7 because the interiors and exteriors of the carriages and wagons are cleaned and maintained like vintage cars, because in some cases that's what they are. And they do require a lot of care and maintenance. I'm showing you some of the works I do here, but not all of them. The next image is of Big John once again, and this is kind of, again, you'll see quite a few of my images. It's looking down, because of course I'm looking down from our balcony or from the window of our apartment, looking down at what's going on, the activity below in the yard. And again, here's another one looking down at the Chip and Jake and John Cundell in the wagon, and a familiar scene of just the side of the house and the side of the tea party. And there's Big John at this gate and some figures in the distance. I've done portraits. I don't say to people that I'm a portrait artist. I say I paint people, and I paint people at work, or people who are under-recognized or behind the scenes workers. And so it's not as if I set out to make them look more important than they are, or to flatter them in that kind of way that you think a portrait artist is doing. I guess I'm most interested in telling a story. And in this story, you can see it's a portrait of Taylor holding on to a 3-week-old baby Cashton. And again, that's what I'm interested in, is just trying to convey that warmth and that love between a mother and her newborn. This is the studio in our apartment. This was in our former dining room. And you can see that on the wall is a large picture in progress, and that's the one that you saw initially at the beginning, the cover of the book with Jake in harness. What you can see is just partway through. And throughout, you can see works in progress and canvases everywhere. And on the right, my table with my paints and my paint boxes that I use to keep the acrylic moist, and jars of paints and brushes. And this is where I was creating things. So it's everything that I don't always work just on one piece at a time. I can work at a few pieces, seeing how things go. One thing you will notice is that there is, I use acrylic, but you can see how I paint a burnt sienna color in the background of all my images. And that just brings a certain warmth to the pieces. And some of that warmth comes through when you paint over it, because I leave some spots for that to come through. I use a limited palette, and I prefer working under natural light. Many of the people listening tonight, maybe painting isn't your profession or your pastime, but there will be some people listening who are familiar with what I'm saying, and understand that I'm using a wash of burnt sienna over everything initially, and then I sketch out my composition in charcoal. I use this, as I say, a limited low-key palette that includes Payne's Gray, Naphtha Red Light, Yellow Ochre, and Titanium White. So that's just the brief art lesson here. I'm going to go on next to, you can see this is Taylor washing Queen. And I knew when I saw Taylor's sleeve of tattoos that I had to put that somehow in a painting, which I think it's like painting a harness. It's really difficult to paint someone's tattoo because tattoos are so complicated and detailed. But I was able to get that through. And I think my background in calligraphy, heraldry, and illumination serves me well for tackling very detailed subject matter. One thing I should explain to people is that I'm showing these pictures. They all look like they're about the same size. But in fact, just to give you an idea, this picture is 40 inches by 40 inches. And it's, say, Taylor watching Queen, almost Queen-like size. And this picture of Taylor exercising Janelle on a lunge line, looking from above, is about 8 inches by 8 inches. So there's a real variety in the sizes that I work in. It's not all consistent. But that's because I think your subject matter, you have to respond to that, and whether it's going to be a small piece or a large piece, it just depends on as I say, yeah, your response. In this piece, with looking at Taylor exercising Janelle on the lunge line, the lunge line in this case, I used gold leaf. And again, that's kind of a reference again to my background in calligraphy, heraldry, and illumination, because we worked with gold leaf and powdered gold a lot in our pieces. So the lunge line isn't really gold, but in my piece, it's just important to emphasize the connection between the family members and their animals, because there is a strong, it is almost like the horses are members of the family. And little Colson was taught by his mom, by Taylor, how to work with the horses, and in this case, Janelle, on the lunge line again. So it's a narrow piece. This piece is 6 inches by 12 inches. So once again, it's a small piece, but it just suited the topic. And I think maybe it's because of the small horses. Looking down once again, here we're looking down at Edgar. And this is Edgar who know. And Edgar comes every 3 weeks to take the manure away from the stables. And he has a parcel of land just outside Perth where he grows turnips and kale for the deer to feed upon. And of course, he fertilizes his land with the manure from Cundell Stables. So I got to know Edgar, and I love looking out the window and seeing when he comes, and it's a huge, huge effort to remove. I'm not going to go into the great detail of it, but it is a huge effort to remove all of the manure, and probably more difficult since the construction next door, because the space is more limited, and it is it's a big production and involves a lot of people, and it's a major effort. But this happens every 3 weeks. I should explain, as I don't think I did before, that when I first started this project, there were 2 of the big horses, the Belgian drafts. That was Jake and Chip, and 6 miniature horses, and that was Dixie and Jill and Janelle and Rosebud and Queen and Dexter. Here is a painting of Patti in the barn, and she's painting the hooves of Jake. So you can just see Jake's legs because he's so huge, and Patti looks like she's tiny, but there she is, just almost under Jake, painting his hooves black. And in the distance you can see there's Chip looking on again curiously, because they always are so curious. This was in preparation for a wedding, because they always do this and make sure the horses just look so like they're attending the wedding. They are so well turned out, and it's important that they do that. The tails are braided, and they really do look spectacular for this. And recently, Patti and John have also been doing Indian weddings, and that's because in the Sikh and Hindu traditions, they have the groom arrive at the wedding venue via horse. Usually it's a white horse, and they're very decorated and costumed and colorful. In this case, a white horse isn't always available in Ottawa, but they were able to hire Patti and John, and what they do is they transport one of the horses by trailer to the wedding venue, because it's usually just outside the city or somewhere in the suburban area. And just close to the wedding venue, that's where the groom will mount the horse. They have a saddle for Jake, and the groom mounts the horse, and then he arrives at the ceremony in a pretty spectacular way on a 2,000-pound horse. So it makes a grand entrance. And just as a kind of a sideline, just a few weeks ago, John Cundell came back from he went to some horse sales in Southern Ontario, and I went into the yard and I saw Patti, and she had 4 big boxes, and she said, "Oh, Johnny brought them back from the horse sales. Do you want to see what's inside?" And there was the most decorative sequined Indian fabric in each one, different in each one, just masses of this fabric. And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, they're horse costumes for Indian weddings." And they're just the most spectacular, decorative pieces of fabric you can ever imagine, with all, of course, no one would really be too interested in that as an item, because it's specific for to fit a horse, and just as in layers of fabric that you would lay over the horse. But the next Indian wedding that John is asked to do, he's really going to be able to impress the guests with that. And here's the farrier. This is Gordon Nesbitt, and Gordon works full-time as a farrier for the RCMP musical Ride, and he has worked with John Cundell for 45 years for Cundell Stables. And in this image, he's working on the shoe of Jake. Jake's so good about putting his leg up for them. They're the most patient horses. In this circumstance, I'm always surprised, but of course the farrier knows how to deal with this. And in this image, John Cundell is sitting watching what's going on, and you can see almost as if it's like a waterfall over his head, just about, of the leathers and all of the tack and the harnesses that are hanging up on that particular wall of the stables. And you can also see little Queen sticking her head out and curious once again at what's going on with this scene. This is Dixie, and Dixie is again one of the miniature horses. One of the regulations is that they're categorized as a black miniature horse if they're 36 inches high, and that's for the shows that they go to. It's one of the regulations. And here's another one you can see with, this is Jill, Janelle, Rosebud, and Queen poking their noses out of the stall again, ever curious. And in this work, I've used a myriad of colorful spots. I think John Cundell mentioned to me, he described it as being like a quilt. And in a way it is, but I think whenever I see those little horses, to me, it's so much like a festive time. It's almost got a circus quality about it. I'm just very positive and happy feeling all the time when I see the little, whenever I used to walk down Dalhousie Street, and if I saw Big John out with one of the little horses, I knew it would be a lucky day. So it's just one of the things I always feel. This is City Horse. And in it, you can see it's a city scene. I had never done cityscapes before this project, but of course I had never lived in an apartment building before. I'd always lived in smaller buildings, smaller houses. And this is the first time I was living on the 5th floor looking out at the city, which was pretty impressive to me. And I wanted to be able to, it was a challenge, but I think what was really important and meaningful for me was the fact that it's like the marriage of old and new. And the buildings are new, and that's part of our world today. And the old is the tradition of the horses, and they're in the work as well. So it's trying to keep the two of them together in the same painting. So in this painting, it's a city horse because it's Big John taking Jake out for a walk. And you can just see him on the sidewalk, and in the distance you can see cars in the parking lot across the street and some trees, and then there are the city blocks and towers and hotels in behind. This is called the hay delivery, and this is, again, like the removal of the manure, the hay delivery was another regular feature. Well, not as often as every 3 weeks, but fairly often, because this is what the horses eat. And they normally keep about 400 bales of hay in the loft of the stables. And Johnny Cundell rents a barn in Navan where he keeps 1,000 bales of hay. And in this image, it's in the yard, the shared yard. You can see there's a car, pickup truck with bales and bales of hay on it. And then there's a tractor, a trailer and a car in front that would have pulled that in. And that piled high with bales of hay, and everyone is helping out. You can see little Colson, his mom Taylor, a family friend, Tyson, John Cundell, and at the top of the trailer and that huge stack of hay bales is Patti Cundell just untying some of the ropes up there. And there's many people inside the barn storing them all away. So this is unloading and loading, and this is a huge family affair. Usually the extended family gets involved in this. These are some works that are almost completed. And I did invite Johnny Cundell and Patti and the family to come and have a look at them. I thought partly so that they could see where I was working, what my view was down of their yard, but also I wanted them to see the works, and I was very nervous about having them come and look, because in a sense it's like saying, this is your life and this is how I see it. And well, I hope that they're happy with what they see. So I'm hoping that I've made a good, I hope I've painted a good story about their life today at the stables. In this next image is the carriage. This one is called Winter on York Street, and it's the carriage with Chip and Jake at the helm, and you can just see the back of Patti and John. And it's a wintry day, and once again, all of the buildings just look like blocks, really, colored blocks. And the cars, you can even tell that, I think, because it's a snowy day, the cars are driving slowly. And in the distance, it's you can just see the Tower of the Parliament buildings. And but this one is another really small one. So again, I'll just explain the difference. Is the last image is 40 inches wide by 20 inches high. And this next image, which looks like it's the same size, but it's in actual fact, again, it's another, I think, 5-inch by 10-inch painting. And this one, again, is on York Street. Of John, and again, the horses and the wagon and the tall, tall buildings surrounding him. Ian took this photograph of me in the backyard rather, of the Cundells in their shared yard. And here I am sitting on my footstool with my easel, and I'm painting a portrait of Patti. And here she is, the portrait of Patti, head and shoulders, looking out at the viewer. And Patti grew up in a dairy farm in Van Cleek Hill. So she certainly knows farm life, but her start was with cows, and now she knows everything there is to know about horses. And Patti and Johnny have been together for 33 years. Patti works tirelessly, I think, as the low-key power behind the throne, and she ensures that the business and home operate smoothly. I always liken it that Patti is like a swan. She's beautiful and she's gliding along effortlessly. However, underneath the water, those feet are working furiously. And that's Patti. She never, ever stops. And this is a portrait of Johnny Cundell in his kind of jaunty summer fedora hat. And I think you can tell from the portrait that Johnny is a larger than life personality. He has a quick wit and enormous generosity and salt of the earth affability. He spent a lifetime working from dawn to dusk. His knowledge of Lowertown is encyclopedic, and he's an expert on horses, harnesses, and all things equine. He's regularly called upon to judge at horse shows across Canada, and really he's a legend in Lowertown. John and Patti have raised 5 children: Shelley, Jason, James, Sean, and Taylor, and they have countless grandchildren. And here's a painting I call Past Meets Present. The Andaz Hotel, who many of you know, in this painting, absolutely from behind it looms over what's a kind of an intimate portrait of the stables, looking down a winter scene where they're getting ready to get the wagon out for winter carolers, because that's one of the things they do that John and Kendall does. Johnny and Patti bring out the wagon and do tours of the Byward Market with the carolers singing. This was my large tribute to Chip. Johnny suggested that I could use this image as an ad for his harness business. And instead, I chose to use it on the cover of the book. So I hope he's happy with that. And this last image I'm showing you here before I go into the book pages is called Pulling Onto York Street. Lots of the images, of course, are on York Street because that's home to the Cundells. And once again, it's probably not unlike Past Meets Present in a sense, but it's showing the carriage from the wagon from behind, with Patti and Johnny driving, and again Chip and Jake at the helm, and the blocks of the tower blocks in colors behind. Again, a larger painting. This one's 40 inches by 40 inches. Now we're coming into the sample book spreads. And I think this will just give you an idea of what it's like inside the book. And you can see on the left, there is a black and white photograph of William Cundell. That's Johnny's grandfather, with a Dalmatian, because they were famous for the Dalmatian. They always had Dalmatians. And then on the right-hand side, it's a market view with, you can see all of the horses and wagons. Again, it's a picture from the early 1900s, that one. There are 136 pages in the book, and the first third is English history, the English history with black and white photographs. The second part of the book, the third part, is color reproductions of all of my paintings and bilingual descriptions of each of the works. The final third is once again black and white, and it's the French translation with all the black and white photographs again. So that gives you an idea of what the book will be like. This next picture, again, another 2-page spread, and that is Fred Cundell inside the barn with Prince, a hackney pony. And on the left-hand page, you'll see a small picture of, it's an old picture of the front of the house that the Cundells live in now. It's 113, 115 York Street. And this is an inside spread page of the Past Meets Present painting and the Pulling Onto York Street painting, how it looks in the book, how it's reproduced. And again, another inside color picture, 2-page spread with A Stable Friendship, that painting. And on the left-hand page, it's like a full bleed picture of a detail of Chip's face. And then on the facing page, you see the full painting. So that gives you an idea of what the book is like. But what I did just want to give you right now is kind of an update, because of course, I started this 2-year project 2 years ago, and I've kind of been describing what went on during that process, but mainly my paintings. But I think it was a difficult time for the Cundells to go through. I think you could say everyone had a difficult time because there was a worldwide pandemic and everything shut down. But the one thing I've learned about the Cundells is that they are absolutely indomitable. They, in the past, I guess, for generations, they have weathered challenges and they've weathered the storms. And the present day is no exception. Their son, Sean, he died in a road accident in 2019 in Thailand, which was a great, great loss. And of course, then John's brother, Fred, he passed away in 2021. And Fred had been Johnny's best friend. So that was another enormous, enormous loss. Chip, the Belgian draft horse, he passed away at Easter in 2021. And then, of course, there was the loss of the shared yard and all the construction that went on next door, which was really a difficult challenge for the family. But as I say, the family are absolutely indomitable. They have found a way to work within their limited space. The wagon and carriage rides are booked up solid for this month. I know this evening they were doing a ride with the French embassy. And they have 2 new Belgian draft horses, Flash and Robbie, who came from Navan. Usually Johnny buys his horses from Ohio, but because of the pandemic, it's made travel, of course, down there impossible. So he was lucky and found 2 wonderful 2-year-old horses, Belgian drafts. And of course, the harness business is picking up. So things are certainly looking up, I think, for everyone, but especially the Cundells after they've had some difficult times. I do want to say that I know for me, this whole time of the pandemic, it's been an absolute privilege to get to know the Cundell family and the stable hand, John O'Hara. And in a sense, it's what got me through this pandemic, although I could say we're not quite through it, but it really has been the Cundell family who have been a real light in my life. And those horses. And right now, I would say, especially Jake, because I love going down to give Jake apples and carrots, and he recognizes my voice and associates it with apples and carrots, and that's always reassuring for me. So it's like hope for me. When I see those horses, to me, it's always hope. The Cundell Stables is really a living legacy of Lowertown's early days, and they're an extraordinary remnant of Ottawa's past. And I'm just going to end in another little story here, and that this is the delivery. I asked Johnny Cundell if he could deliver my large paintings to the exhibition at the Ottawa School of Art because they don't fit, they're too large for our vehicle. So yesterday morning, the weather was beautiful, and Jake and the wagon and Johnny and Patti arrived at 10 a.m. and my husband Ian and our friend Charles helped to load up the wagon, and we brought it to the Ottawa School of Art. And in this image, you can see Jake and the wagon loaded up with paintings, and Ian and Charles removing the largest one. And there's the art school in the background. And I thought it could almost, if this was a black and white picture, you could almost think this was 100 years ago because of the same lamp standards. The architecture of the Ottawa School of Art is so old. And then there's the old wagon and the old horse in a gorgeous harness. So it could be from another age for sure. So this just brings me to my exhibition, and certainly everyone is invited to attend my exhibition. It's called The Last Stable in Lowertown, Cundell Stables, at the Ottawa School of Art, 35 George Street, and it's from January 4th until February 13th, 2022. The book is estimated the time arrival, it'll be there in early January. The Vernissage book launch was, the date selected by the art school is Thursday, January 20th, between 5 and 8 p.m. Although I think the books will be available before then too. But the actual launch and vernissage will be on the 20th. And the hours of operating at the Ottawa School of Art are Monday to Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday and Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Sunday, 12:30 to 4. And I will be at the gallery every Saturday afternoon between 12 and 4 p.m. And there are 4 Saturday days during the course of my exhibition. And it's just because I know a lot of people might want to see me and see the work at the same time and maybe buy a book. And so I thought that was a good time to be there. Right now, Kathy Brake, who's the manager of the gallery, has been hanging the exhibition and doing just a fabulous job. And I really wanted to thank her for all of her work that she's been putting into this. And, you know, the Ottawa School of Art was always my first choice of having an exhibition of the Cundell Stables work, because the Ottawa School of Art is so close to Cundell Stables. It's close to where we live, and it's in a beautiful historic building. I just thought you couldn't get a more perfect location for an exhibition. It's accessible. It's a wonderful institution, and they have great hours. They're open really nice long hours. So it's a wonderful place for people to come and visit. I want to now thank you for joining this Heritage Ottawa lecture. And I hope that you're able to come out to the exhibition.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen, for this fantastic and warm and lovely view of a truly hidden gem in the Byward market. And your talk has resonated with so many of us here tonight, given some of the comments, and you're eliciting a lot of warm memories that people have. So thank you for agreeing to stay and take a few questions. Our audience is now invited to pose questions for Karen, and I ask that you please use the question and answer function, which appears at the bottom right of your screen. And I'll moderate the questions for repetition and length. So first of all, I'd like to start and ask you if you had any difficulty initially befriending the horses, and did you end up with a favorite or two?
I have to admit, they'll all be your favorite if you bring them something to eat, a little bit of apple or a little bit of carrot. And as I was mentioning just at the end, that Jake has come to recognize my voice. And I know if I come into the stable and I'm speaking to Big John, I can hear the kind of thumping of the hoof against the floorboard, and I know that Jake is thumping and thumping and thumping, and it's get my attention because he knows he wants me to come around and give him a little piece of apple. So that I have to admit right now, Jake is my favorite. I love the little horses, are lovely. They really are. And I must say there's nothing like the feel of a soft horse's mouth against the palm of your hand.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. I can just imagine it, and certainly your images give us such a clear idea of what that must be like. One early question we had was where do the Cundells keep the carts and carriages?
They keep them. They have a space there's a building, a couple of doors down, an apartment building, and in that building there's a big underground car park, and they keep them there. They have spaces there for the carriages, so they're always moving them in and out. Of course, when there was more space, they would sometimes leave them in the shared yard, but they also are always meticulous about covering them up immediately after each ride and then storing them away. And so they really do look after their equipment.
We can tell. Another early question, and I think I know the answer to this, but someone was asking about the size of the little horse and the smaller horse, and I think it was Dixon, I'm not sure.
Dixie.
In your Dixie, in the painting with the quilt background.
Yeah, that painting, it's funny because I look at it on the screen, it looks like it's the same size as the one of Chip-in Harness, but I did a series of small paintings of the small horses that are 6 inches by 6 inches because they kind of warrant that size, that intimate, accessible size. So that little painting, Dixie, is 6 inches by 6 inches. And just if you contrast that with the one of Chip-in Harness, which is 60 inches by 60 inches. They all
Yeah,
look the same size on the screen, though.
right, right. A timely question has to do with the recent movement to stop the use of horses in Lowertown. And someone is wondering if the Cundells will be affected by this.
Well, I hope that they're not, because the one thing is I have watched the Cundells for the last 2 years, and they, as I say, look after their animals like their family. They are so wonderful. I'm not an expert on animals or an expert on horses, but I know what I see, and I've seen inside the stables and outside the stables, and I've watched this over the course of 2 years, and I know how well they treat their animals, and I hope that that there isn't any kind of a ban or whatever on horses, because I know how they treat their animals with such great respect. And they're working, and the big horses are working horses. And I always liken it in some ways to the way a guide dog for the blind. They enjoy their work. They wouldn't do it if they didn't enjoy it, because it's like a guide dog for the blind. If they don't want to do the job, they just don't want to do it. That's it. They won't do it. And it's the same, these horses, they love their work.
That's a really good point. And a further comment from someone mentioned that they're hoping to include the intangible heritage of horses in, I guess, the Lowertown or the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District. And you know, it's hard because often these frameworks are limited to physical elements and not the living heritage of the area. So we hope that in the future that they can be included in our concept of heritage, because I think it's very essential.
Yes.
As far as other questions, we have so many wonderful comments thanking you for your warm tribute and the beautiful paintings. And as I say, you've triggered the memories of a few people who've written that they remember their grandparents living on Clarence Street and having the offer of a sleigh ride, which would pass by their house on the way to Rockcliffe. And goodness knows, I think we've all seen those sleigh rides in the market, and how far he will go out in order to accommodate people for sleigh rides. And another person talks about coal being delivered by horse-drawn carts in the 1950s. And you know, they are really a part of our you know, heritage history. So it's just been wonderful to see how the Cundells have survived, and particularly through your eyes as an artist.
Well, I mean, in the book, what Marc has documented, you know, quite extensively is just how often the horses were used, as say, whether it was for coal or whether it was delivering with dairy or garbage collection, snow plowing. Horses were used for that. And of course, this is what Fred Cundell was doing with his horses, and William Cundell as well. They were doing city work, as say, in those areas, as they plus for the various companies. So this was just all part of it. And there are people that I've met too who remember when the bread was delivered by horse. And in fact, I have a friend, Greet Hale, whose father owned Morrison Lamoth Bakery. And she remembers as a child, they had stables full of horses that they used for their delivery of bread. And Greet says she always remembers her father saying he would only do business with Fred Cundell, or any of the Cundell, William Cundell, Fred Cundell, of the Cundell family, because they were the only reputable horse dealers in the city.
Interesting. Well, not surprising to hear from what you've shown us.
Yeah.
Another question about how are the horses exercised, and do they ever get any time out in the pasture somewhere to graze?
Well, with the little ones, sometimes they go out and will often spend, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of the year out in the country, out in Navan, I believe it is. And certainly then with the larger horses, that they're working all the time in the sense, I mean, it sounds, but I mean, that's what they enjoy, is they're out, their form of exercise is getting out, and they love it. I can tell when I see, especially when I'd see Jake and Chip out harnessed up, ready to go, and Jake would be putting his head up and down like this. And we knew it was like, he said, let's go. And he would only do that when and he was always so happy. And once they get going, that's what they love doing. I mean, you think about over the generations, those horses, whether they're working in the logging industry or whether they were working on farms on the land, that's what they love to work. That's their raison d'etre, and and use their strength and their power, and that's why they're just great when they're going around with the wagon full of people. I mean, we're all happy on the wagon, and they're really happy to be pulling the wagon.
It's so true, and you can tell, like, they're joyful. They seem joyful. So this has just been such a fascinating project, and we wonder what's next for you.
Well, currently I'm working on a project for the Ottawa Mission, which some of your membership and the viewers may know about, and they help to support underprivileged people in the community. And certainly what I'm doing is I'm documenting the 17 different programs that the mission offers their clients. I've already started I did a series of 5 paintings of people related to the hospice that the mission has. And they have wonderful food services. I'm going to be documenting Chef Rick's, his place on Rideau Street. I'm documenting the housing officers and the administration and every different aspect of the Ottawa Mission, because they do remarkable work for the city of Ottawa.
They do indeed. That's a fantastic project. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up, and I just want to thank you again. I mean, this has just been so heartwarming, and I feel very sentimental as someone who's been in Ottawa for 35 years and spent some of that time living in the market around the corner from the stable. So thank you so much for your insight and for your absolutely beautiful work. And I assure you that many of us are going to come to the exhibition in early January, and we look so forward to seeing that.
Well,
so thank you again.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm glad to hear you say that, and I can't think of a more fitting subject for the Christmas season. So thank you again. And I'd like to remind our registrants for tonight's lecture that you'll be receiving a brief survey tomorrow via email, and we'd be grateful if you could fill that out for us. And also, I know a number of you asked that about the lecture and if it will be available later to view, and it will be posted on YouTube in the next day or two, so you can look for it there. So Heritage Ottawa's next lecture will be online on Wednesday, the 19th of January next year, when architect Tone Driesen will present how a cohesive architecture policy can create a better built environment. So please remember that online registration is required and will be available on the Heritage Ottawa website. And finally, as Catherine mentioned at the beginning, our lectures are provided free of charge. So we'd encourage you to join Heritage Ottawa if you're not already a member, and to make a donation to the organization to help us continue our efforts to share heritage stories. information is, of course, available on the website. And so with that, I'd like to wish everybody a good night and all the best wishes for a happy and healthy and peaceful holiday and wonderful new year. Thanks again, everybody. Good night.